Good evening and welcome to the third ERS Vision Live panel discussion featured exclusively on the ERS Respiratory channel. Today's discussion will focus on climate change and asthma, detailing the recently released ERS position statement on asthma and the environment. The talk will be broken down into three topics: asthma and climate change, green inhalers, and the green asthma patient. We are delighted to welcome today's panel, which brings together leading figures in the field of respiratory disease and lung health, led by ERS Advocacy Chair, Professor Arzu Yorgançoğlu. Arzu is a professor of respiratory medicine at the Celal Bayar University in Turkey. She is the Advocacy Council Chair of ERS, and her research interests focus on obstructive lung diseases, asthma, and COPD. She is also a board member of GINA, the Global Initiative for Asthma. Good evening, Professor Yorgançoğlu.
Good evening, Mev. Thanks for your kind words and introduction. Firstly, I welcome everyone joining online to support this new ERS initiative, for which we are thrilled to share this evening. We welcome any and all questions you may wish to ask our guests and the panel. Joining me on the panel and also the great contributors of our statement will be my colleagues, Professor Omar Usmani, Professor Zorana Anderson, and Kjeld Hansen, Chair of European Lung Foundation. My dear friend, Professor Usmani, is a respiratory consultant at Imperial College London. He is the head of ERS Assembly 5, and his clinical and research interests are in asthma, COPD, and chronic cough, and he's a real expert in inhalers. Welcome, Omar.
Arzu, thanks very much for the introduction. It's my absolute delight to be here on World Asthma Day and on the launch of the ERS position statement. And as you said, questions. So throughout today, I'll be manning the Q&A on ERS Live. So I'd encourage all the viewers to submit a question, no matter how long or short, because it's a great panel and it's a great opportunity to engage with the panel, get their thoughts, get their reflections. And so really looking forward to it, Arzu.
Thank you, Omar. Professor Zorana Anderson is a professor in environmental epidemiology at the University of Copenhagen, esteemed chair of our Environment and Health Committee, and her main research area are health effects related to exposure to air pollution, with focus on asthma and COPD. Welcome, Zorana.
Thank you, Arzu, very much for a kind introduction, and great pleasure to be here tonight and discuss climate change and asthma on World Asthma Day.
Thank you. And joining us to give a patient perspective is my dear friend Kjeld Hansen. Kjeld is an asthma patient and patient ambassador who has been collaborating with the European Lung Foundation for the past 10 years. Kjeld is currently serving as the chair of the European Lung Foundation. We are so happy to have you on the panel. Kjeld, welcome.
Thank you so much. So I'm also delighted to be here, especially on the World Asthma Day. So happy World Asthma Day to everyone. So ELF has been working with air pollution issues through a long time as one of its key priorities, and also as one of the priorities in our Healthy Lungs for Life campaign. So I'm absolutely delighted to be here and look forward to the discussion and the questions.
Thank you, Kjeld. This is our panel. Over to you, Matt.
Joining us to help elaborate on our first topic, asthma and climate change, is François Wackenhut. François Wackenhut is head of the Clean Air Unit in the Directorate General for the Environment of the European Commission since mid-2016.
Good evening. Thank you very much for the invitation and for allowing the Commission to be part of the conversation. It's a great pleasure, a great honor for us to be here and to join you on such an important day, and we've read with great interest the position paper that has been put forward, and I can already confirm that this is incredibly useful for the considerations of the Commission in the journey forward that I believe we're going to be able to discuss further today.
Great. Professor Yorgançoğlu, today is World Asthma Day. The ERS has released a statement on asthma and the environment. Would you be kind enough to tell us why ERS needs to make such a statement?
Of course, I will be happy to. Omar and myself were reviewing and consulting the F-gases legislation in the EU last year. And we have noticed that we, as ERS, one of the leading respiratory organizations in the world, have a word to say on asthma and environment. That's how it begins. So as ERS, our mission is to promote lung health, which cannot be done only by biomedical approach. We need to deal with social determinants of health, such as tobacco, air pollution, climate change, poverty, and many more. Tackling with these prevents non-communicable diseases and chronic respiratory diseases. So our statement outlines how climate change and air pollution currently affects patients with asthma and how the ambitious European Union Green Deal can provide solutions. We also consider the complex interplay between asthma inhalers and the respiratory patients and the climate change. These statements have been developed and led by the ERS Advocacy Council and the ERS Environment and Health Committee, ERS Assembly 5, and with great contributions of Assembly 6, Assembly 7, which are Epidemiology, Environment, and Pediatrics, and European Lung Foundation. I would like to finish my introduction or my reply to you with a statement of Ursula von der Leyen, President of the European Commission, and our statement also begins with her sentences. For the generation of my children, Europe is a unique aspiration. It is an aspiration of living in a natural and healthy continent. I am convinced that the old growth model based on fossil fuels or pollution is out of date now and out of touch with our planet. So, with this statement, ERS comes with the responsibility of planetary health, which is so closely related with our airways treatments. So the topic mainly goes to Environment and Health Committee. So we reach Zorana. Zorana, what do you think? What are the most important aspects of climate change of asthma for asthma patients, and how does air pollution affect asthma patients?
Thank you, Arzu. So there are many aspects of climate change that are directly related to health of asthma patients. First of all, when we think about climate change, most of us primarily connect climate change to temperature increases, more extreme weather, more hot weather, and heat. We know very well that temperature directly, the heat, the hot air, and the humid air directly can increase exacerbation and exacerbate asthma and lead to need for asthma hospitalizations or increased risk of asthma attacks. Second, related to temperature, is that temperature is also related to more warm weather, and more weather will increase the exposure to ozone, one of the major pollutants, especially in the cities. And ozone, we know, is a very strong irritant of the airways and can lead to very severe asthma attacks. Apart from temperature and heat, another important aspect of climate change to asthma patients is increase to pollen and another allergens, which is related to increase in temperatures that are expected with climate change. So we'll have longer pollen season, as well as transmission of allergens to new areas where we haven't seen pollen exposure as a problem before. And all of this will, of course, have a great impact to allergic asthma patients, and about half of asthma patients are also allergic. Third aspect of climate change related to increase in extreme weather is that we'll likely see increase of droughts and dry spells around the world. This will increase the risk of dust storms in the parts of the world where dust and exposure to dust storm and such air pollution episodes will be a problem for asthma patients, as well as increase in wildfires, which we see now in hot periods around the world are a problem, that wildfires and burning of wood can expose local populations to very high, extreme high levels of air pollution and affect asthma patient risk. Along with drought in some parts of the world, in some others, we may see more extreme weathers in terms of increased rainfalls, flooding, and these humidity-related extreme events will also affect negatively asthma patients, as humidity is not good for asthma patients, as well as humidity will increase development of mold indoors, which is, of course, also a very important risk factor for asthma. So this is about climate change. Related to climate change, of course, is of air pollution and related to fossil fuels. Burning of fossil fuels are main risk of both our climate changes and, of course, main risk of air pollution exposure. We know a lot about air pollution and asthma, and air pollution is increasingly recognized risk factor for asthma. We know very well mechanistically that gases and particles that we inhale in our lungs cause oxidative injury, inflammation, and increased risks of sensitization in people, and this can lead to increased risk of the development of asthma. We know now and have a great number of studies in children to know that over 4 million children globally every year develop asthma due to air pollution, and this accounts for 13% of all asthma in children. We know more and more from adults, from studies in adults, that similar picture is also seen in adults, and air pollution can also cause onset of adult asthma. Apart from this risk of developing new asthma, one of the main impacts of air pollution is really worsening the life of asthma patients in kind of short-term exposure settings. For example, if we commute to work and are in high levels of air pollution in a traffic, in our commute, or other episodes of air pollution, this can really worsen the life of asthma patient, increase risk of asthma symptoms, asthma attacks, need for use of asthma medication, as well as more severe outcomes such as asthma hospitalization or even asthma death. We have an unfortunate case that has been just recently ruled. This is a very unique case and a coroner ruling in UK, in London, where air pollution was directly recognized as a cause of death of a young girl, 6-year-old Ella Kisi Debra, who died in 2013 in London. And the case recognized that her death was directly related to her living in an area with high level of nitrogen dioxide related to traffic air pollution, and her frequent admissions to hospital during winter where air pollution is high, and her location of her residence close to busy road. This is a hallmark case that recognizes exactly how severe consequences air pollution can have on asthma patient, which will make likely a main impact in our field in pushing policymakers for cleaner air pollution. Apart from outdoor air pollution and this well-recognized effects on both development and aggravation of asthma, I would also like to mention that also indoor air pollution is very important for asthma patients, and we know that indoor tobacco smoke, air pollution from wood burning for our heating and cooking, exposure to mold, dust, cooking from gas stoves, all can also increase risk of asthma attacks in asthma patients. So air pollution and climate change are both important factors for asthma patients.
Very bad news. Yes, you're right. And just a quick question and I want a quick comment from you. Has current COVID-19 pandemic taught us anything about climate change and asthma? Short answer, please.
Very good question. Of course, this pandemic has taught us some lessons. First of all, we know that the root causes of climate change are related to causes of COVID-19 with our loss of biodiversity and transmission of viruses from animals to humans are acute reminder that health of our planet, of our environment is closely related to our health. Secondly, we have new emerging evidence that air pollution is maybe increasing risk of COVID-19 infections and its severity. And this is very important for asthma patients who are already compromised due to air pollution. So COVID-19, we can say, is just another reason to do something about air pollution as a good way of preventing asthma, improving life for asthma patients, as well as providing more resilient populations in futures to COVID-19 and similar pandemics.
Thank you, Zarana. We will go on. As part of the European Green Deal, the European Commission is committed to revising the EU ambient air quality directives to more closely align them with WHO guidelines. We will also be dealing tonight with the legislative concerns with our guest from EU, Mr. Wekenat, François Wekenat. We very much like to hear from you, François. Please.
Thank
Would you like to
Arzu.
say?
Yeah. Thank you very much, Arzu. And thank you for starting the conversation by quoting President von der Leyen and her commitment to the European Green Deal and indeed to the next generations, because this is what this is truly about. It's about transforming the EU society, the EU's economy into a true sustainable future. This is what the Green Deal's philosophy is about. And as part of it, there is a need to tackle many dimensions that have caused the problems that we face today and that have been so eloquently depicted just now by Zorana. It is very clear that air pollution remains a very significant problem in Europe. It is a cause of serious diseases such as asthma, as we're reminded today. It is unfortunately also a cause of cardiovascular problems, lung cancer that was mentioned as well. And you all know about the estimates of around 400,000 premature deaths per year in the EU alone. So we are committed indeed to do more about it. And the Green Deal is the framework through which we will do so. And one of the actions under the European Green Deal will focus precisely on what we call the zero pollution ambition. And under that ambition that encompasses a number of initiatives, there is one that focuses exactly on what you quoted, Arzu, which is revising the ambient air quality legislation. As you may know, we went through a very heavy exercise over the past few years called a fitness check in the jargon that we use in Brussels, but this is no more than a very thorough evaluation of our policy. And that evaluation was concluded in November 2019. What did it conclude? It concluded, among other things, but I think those elements are particularly salient today, that air quality remains a major health concern in the EU, and that obviously, as we all know, the current EU standards are not as ambitious as the latest scientific advice would recommend. So this is part of the considerations and a major part of the considerations that we're giving to the next steps. We cannot jump to any conclusions as of yet for many reasons. One reason being, of course, that we first need to know what the latest evidence will be. And we're all eagerly waiting for the WHO to let us know about the latest recommendations that will be so important for us to calibrate future efforts. But what we know is that a number of our standards, as they are already not as ambitious as the current WHO recommendations. That is the case for particulate matter, and that is certainly a cause for us to do more in order to align with the recommendations that will emerge in any case. And to do that, we need to be extremely broad in our methodology to consult all relevant stakeholders. So we see your input, we see your statement, we see your contributions as a crucial element to guide us towards the journey that will accompany us until the second half of 2022, which will see the moment where we will put forward new proposed legislation to the European Parliament, to the member states of the European Union, which will try and deliver indeed better protection of health of our citizens in the interest of the many points that Zorana has highlighted in order to serve the benefits of the patients that we're all committed to tonight. So that is the mandate that we've got.
Thank you, Francois. It's very nice to hear all those statements. For the European Green Deal to have the maximum positive impact on asthma, the ERS would like to see the most ambitious zero pollution action plan for water, air, and soil. Thank you very much for your participation and for inspiring and our work. And ERS is always ready to contribute in any way to EU guidelines. Thank you. Over to you, Mel.
We will now say goodbye to Francois until the summary section at the end of the event. And welcome to Maureen Donoghue-Hardwick for our next topic, Green Inhaler. Maureen serves as the Secretariat and Legal Counsel of the International Pharmaceutical Aerosol Consortium, IPAC. IPAC's mission is to ensure that environmental policies relevant to inhaled therapies are patient-centric and appropriately balance both patient care and sustainability objectives. Welcome, Maureen.
Thank you very much, Mieve. What a pleasure and a privilege to be part of this wonderful panel. We're grateful to be invited, and we really welcome the ERS statement, and the conversation that's occurred already, I think, illustrates so well the importance of bringing stakeholders together and the inspiring future that we can look forward to. So thank you very much.
It's lovely to have you. Professor Usmani, can you tell us what exactly qualifies an inhaler to be considered green?
Maeve, great question. So I would say a patient that can use their inhaler, that's been taught how to use their inhaler, and that will use the inhaler is really qualifying an inhaler to be green, and really just breaking those three things down. And I know we're going to probably get some questions on this from the attendees and also from the other panel members. Do we ever check that our patient can actually use the inhaler properly? And they need to use the inhaler properly. That's efficiency, and that will impact on in helping the environment. Have they been taught how to use the inhaler? And the whole area and the discussion that we're having with the EU and with governments has really put inhalers on the map, and we and impart that to our patients so that they've been taught correctly on how to use the inhalers. And then will they use that? And will they, maybe that's an umbrella term for adherence, will they use that inhaler device? And that really focuses, Maeve, I think, on engaging the patient with the inhaler device. It's a bi-directional discussion with the patient, and really it's really important that we concentrate on these three areas, but it is much more than just the inhaler, and I'm sure we'll touch on that a little bit more a little later. Maeve.
Omar, many of the disciplines within clinical medicine have in the past decade focused their attention towards precision medicine initiatives that directed the community to focus on personalizing treatment, individualized to the patients. So, and we believe that the right language must be used in any directive or document that does not support a particular pharmaceutical product. So we are very much supporting the term low or zero global warming potential inhaler medical aerosol as the preferred language. So it is important for an inhaler to be low or zero global warming potential. What can you say about patient safety and efficacy to inhalers in terms of personalized medicine?
Yeah, no, Arzu, you're absolutely right. The language has to be right. And I think governments and policymakers need to get the language right. It isn't about a particular class of device. It is about achieving a low global warming potential inhaler. And that is available to us at the moment. We have the choice as healthcare professionals to choose low global warming potential inhaler devices for our patients. We have the choice of using some areas reusable inhalers rather than single-use inhalers. And you talk about personalization, and I think very briefly, when we see all branches of medicine moving towards personalized medicine initiative, why are we denying our respiratory patients the choice of the breadth of inhaler devices? And what do I mean by that? Some of the policy that's related to, specifically here, inhalers and climate change has been interpreted as switch patients from one particular inhaler device to another when they are stable. And really, that I think that's probably something for us to reflect on as healthcare professionals. Would we switch our stable diabetic patients that we've spent months to normalize their glucose levels? Would we change our hypertensive patients who we've stabilized for months to get their blood pressure right? So why do we have a knee-jerk response to change the inhaler? We need to find the right balance, Arzu, and I think that's what you are getting at. We need to find the balance between the patient's need and the environmental concerns. And I know the others have a perspective on this as well. And it does focus on safety for the patient, efficacy for the patient. And we know that some patients cannot use devices that require strong flow. So they're very young. They're very ill in an acute situation, an acute asthma attack or in a COPD exacerbation, and very old. They find it difficult to generate high inspiratory flows with certain devices. So you've covered the key areas. The language needs to be right. We need to have the choice as healthcare professionals to be able to present that to our patients and have this shared decision process. And also we need to think about safety and efficacy and balance the needs of the patient.
Yes, yes. And also inhaler innovation is going away. So we have to keep an eye on the inhaler innovation. So there will be more and more zero or low global warming potential inhalers in near future. And they are also being developed now. I would like to ask Maureen, because we know that multifaceted approach is needed in this aspect. What would you like to say about it?
Well, thank you, Arzu, and keep me in check because I'd probably like to say way too much for the time we have. But quickly, IPAC believes really strongly in a multi-stakeholder, multifaceted approach and building on what Omar said to really take a holistic patient journey approach when we think about the sustainability of respiratory therapy. And I think we'll get into this a little more deeply when we talk about the green patient, but it can be very tempting and I think actually quite natural and understandable to focus solely, say, on the propellant or particular devices. But in order, we believe, to have the broadest impact, you really begin to look from diagnosis all the way through to end of life and disposal of the inhaler, and ensure that at the outset, the patient's treatment is optimized and that they're using the right inhaler or inhalers for their disease, that they're comfortable, that they're actually using them, and then at the end of life, that they can hopefully have a way to return them to minimize the environmental impact. But at the end of the day, which is a wonderful balance and combination, we believe that if a patient's asthma is well controlled, that's actually the best for the environment. So you can look at all of those aspects, and there is innovation ongoing on the propellant, which I think is wonderful, and I'd be happy to talk about that later, but just a few initial thoughts.
Thank you. Amar, do we have any questions from the audience? So we can answer or we can go on?
No. I would go on. Yeah, no, for sure, Arzu.
Please. Please, you go on, Omar.
So we've got a question really on innovation, and I think if I just pick up Maureen, I know you've been involved a lot in understanding the landscape with respect to innovation. Could you just give us some top line reflections?
Absolutely. And our work within IPAC and our member companies really started 30 years ago, and the innovation that had to occur to achieve the goals of the Montreal Protocol on substances that deplete the ozone layer. So we've thought a lot about these issues. And actually just moments ago, Omar and I were both at another conference with the magic of virtual, the Respiratory Drug Delivery Conference, and really heartening to see all of the talks, not just the one that we participated in, but these are really the people who are in the heart of research and development, are dealing with all the technical issues. And it's clear that they have sustainability and the environmental impact front of mind. On the inhaler propellants in particular, there's been some public announcements of the work that's being done on lower global warming potential propellants. And so already significant toxicological and safety studies have been completed. And then companies are working really hard and investing into those in the future. In the meantime, when we think about the Montreal Protocol, innovation was spurred by that. We have a wonderful range, as Omar mentioned, of dry powder inhalers, soft mist inhalers, some of which are reusable now. So that in many ways, these environmental issues have spurred and will continue to spur innovation, and we believe strongly that should be encouraged.
Back to you, Arzu.
Okay, Okay, Kelsey, I would like to ask you in this matter, what about patient's choice on inhalers? Does it matter for a patient? Patient
Yes.
preference?
Yeah, thank you so much. So I think it really does, and I think you can tell a difference between the different inhalers that you're using. So in the country where I'm residing, I have a choice for which inhaler to use, and I also had the option to infer my own preference, right, in the matter that the doctor is recommending different kinds of medicines to me, and I've used that right many times. So now I'm in a situation where I have found a preferred option that is working for me and so on. And it has really been good to be a part of that collaborative decision making, as I would like to tell it, because it really enhances your own treatment and also your incentive, right, to follow your own treatments.
Thank you. Zorana, would you like to say anything about recycling in inhalers and inhaler life cycle in terms of environment?
Thank you. Yes, so in a zero pollution plan, of course, recycling is one of the very important topics, and recycling of asthma inhalers is also a priority of the zero pollution plan and entire European Green Deal. So this is also some very important aspect, and we look forward to solutions of this problem also, both with respect to patients' choice and on inhaler producers on this topic. So very important to provide better recycling of the asthma products.
Yeah, thank you. Amar, would you like to comment on what has been said till now?
Yeah, no, I totally agree. Governments need to be serious about recycling and inhaler recycling. I know, Maureen, you feel very strongly about this as well, and Zorana, you've mentioned it. We've actually mentioned it as well in our statements. And they need to support. They need to support the infrastructure so that inhalers can be recycled. Absolutely. There's a lot of innovation going on at the moment, and maybe we'll have a discussion towards the end about the current exemption that we have for medical use of F-gas in medical inhalers, as well as in anesthetic gases, and it almost parallels the exemption that we had with CFC when they were phased out. We're going towards a phased down approach of the current F-gas. So the exemption, because there is a lot of innovation that's happening, as Maureen said, with new propellants, with new chemistry, new engineering of devices. So this the current discussions really is allowing a lot of research and development and inhalation science evolution to get better devices that are more efficient for our patients, that our patients can engage with. And we mustn't lose this opportunity, Arzu.
Yes, I agree. Maureen, would you like to have some more comments on this issue before we close this part?
Maybe just briefly to echo, I think already what's been said, and I really do think that the innovation is being spurred, and we'd be happy to talk more about the exemption maybe in the next section. And also we have, as IPAC, we are working on that end-of-life disposal, because as Zorana said, that is really important in so many ways, giving the patient some control, because patients care about the environment. They want to do the environmentally right thing. And so we do have a pilot program in the UK on awareness raising and changing that behavior so that patients will know that they can return their inhaler to the pharmacy, leverage some existing infrastructure that minimizes the environmental impact. And we hope over time we'll have some metrics and can show the value of that.
Thank you. Over to you, Mav, now.
Thanks again, Arzu. For our final topic, we are going to discuss how asthma patients can manage their own impact on the environment by becoming a green patient. Professor Hansen, this is a debatable topic. What are the key issues to consider?
So thank you, Maeve. I think one of the overarching issues here is that asthma patients, they have more at stake than most people when we discuss climate change. Of course, we should underline that the primary emphasis to tackle climate change and air pollution must always be a regulatory action and legislative change, as we outline in the position statement. But I think we should also consider that regulatory action and legislative change can also be influenced by individual action and choices and advocacy and so on. And there are some complementary actions that individuals have the opportunity to take. So I think more and more people living with asthma are becoming green patients. So patients who are enabled by green regulations and facilitated to make conscious choices to reduce their carbon footprint without compromising health outcomes. And more individuals, they're looking also to their everyday life to be greener, including their food sources, their travel choices, their household products, their clothing choices, and so on. So the concepts that the patient have the choice to be green in their healthcare is not something that as yet seems to be high on the agenda. However, I'm sure that change is coming at the moment. So I think the issue here is to make sure that health of the person with asthma is not impacted whilst getting greener choices where possible. But on the same time, consider that asthma and green choices are also connected, and that choosing one instead of the other might seem self-contradictory.
I would like to ask you a question, regulation versus individual action. Which one is more important for a patient?
Yes, so I think, of course, we need to look at the big picture, right, when we consider these things. So we should underline that the primary emphasis must be on the regulative action and the legislative change, right? But on the same time, I think that we also need to consider the significant power that is attributed to the individual in the modern world. And we have seen examples of how a younger generation can really be agenda setting in the climate discussion. And why not also asthma patients?
Okay. I would like to ask all panelists about ethics and sustainability. Would you like to express your thoughts, Ömer, Zorana, Maureen?
Well, I mean, if I kick off, and when we were listening earlier on to Francois, that he said there are many dimensions that we need to assess, and long-term sustainability and the future of generations, and I think one area, one concern I have is that we're addressing a problem at the moment that is the F-gas and is the environment in the skies above. But whatever solutions that we implement over the course of the next 5 to 10 years, they mustn't be at a detriment to the planet in another area. So, for example, plastics polluting our oceans and our marine life and marine biology. So we need to think carefully with respect to certainly in the inhaler area, about if we're talking about ethics and sustainability, Arzu, with respect to legislation and looking down to future generations.
Yeah. Zorana, would you like to say something?
Yes, thank you. I would like to echo Kjell's excellent comments about this very important choice of and recommendations, whether personally we have a responsibility or asthma patient has responsibility to be a green patient and reduce own exposure to air pollution to improve health, or responsibility lays more in the hand of regulators, and I think answer is both. But I think of course as small reductions in air pollution can be made by patients themselves, the main focus is of course on regulatory action and legislative change. We would like to emphasize that. Another ethical aspect is in information. I think interesting aspect in the case of Ella, girl that died from asthma, in a court ruling said that the failure to give information to mother about air pollution effects on asthma was one of the major implications of this case and lessons to be learned. That we also need to, a lot of people's asthma patients and clinicians are not that aware of, for example, impacts of air pollution and climate change on patients. So there's another responsibility to share the knowledge and implement this in the clinical work also for asthma patients. So those are some aspects I would like to bring on these discussions.
Thank you. Maureen?
Mm-hmm.
So excellent comments, all of them beautifully stated. I mean, maybe just to build on that idea of education and conversation and collaboration, it's certainly something that we learned through the many years of the CFC transition under the Montreal Protocol is how important it was for the different stakeholders to talk together. We had in Europe, in the United States, and other regions, we had stakeholder groups that IFA, the ERS, many others participated in. And I think that we've also seen already now and ongoing with the F-gases regulation, the European Commission has been very open and welcoming and encouraging to listen to the clinician and patient voice. And I think that spirit of discussion and collaboration and then education and knowledge sharing is really critical. So really, again, much of what you all have already said, but just to build on that with our personal experience. And in some ways, that is what should fuel and drive the legislation early on, is that voice, maybe rather than later. And again, we've seen with the European Commission, I think they're doing a wonderful job, at the early phase of reviewing the F-gases regulation to create a space for that discussion.
Thank you. Kels, one final question for this part. What should be the patient role to make a difference? What do you think?
So that's a very interesting question. Again, so I think the patient role is also changing here, and I think I hear that echoed also in the comments of the panel, right? So we are not only talking about a patient, getting the medicine, taking the medicine to the best of their ability, and so on. Now we are also talking about ethical choices. We are talking about education, and we are talking about a wider range of issues in connection with being an asthma patient. So I think the patient role is gradually changing, and I think rightly so. Patients, they prefer to be empowered, right, to make their own decisions, because some part of their life is controlled by doctors and advice and so on. And allowing patients to make these choices and to take collaborative actions with doctors and so on, in order to make greener choices and to make their actions and their own ethics have influence on their treatment, I think is the role of the green patient and of the patient of the new generation.
Thanks very much. Ma'am, I would like to, Amar, please.
Yeah, no, Arzu, I was just going to say we've got a couple of questions that I think, would sit well here, and we've got some for the later session. But briefly, Zorana, we've got a question: how strong is the evidence on air pollution from biomass burning and asthma in children? So far many low middle income countries report lower burden of asthma despite exposure to higher air pollution. So could you briefly comment on that? And then I think there's another question we've got for Kjeld as well.
Thank you, Omar. There is very strong evidence of all types of air pollution and asthma in children and biomass burning. I guess this is in context of low-income countries and indoor exposure to biomass burning with cooking and heating, which is, of course, a huge problem. We have less research and evidence from these countries. This is related to the socioeconomic status and infrastructure and research, but we definitely know that levels of air pollution indoors related to biomass burning are a huge risk factor for childhood asthma, as they are outdoors. Short answer to.
Yeah, no, thanks. Kjeld, and I think also Maureen, and we can, I'm sure Arzu fit this in. A very interesting question. So shouldn't the choice of inhaler medicine be driven by safety and efficacy considerations for each patient and not its environmental impact? What do you think of that?
Yeah, so I think that there is a clear priority to be made here, right? So I think first and foremost, we need to take care of the health issue. And then I'm putting my good faith in the innovation processes that is commented so much about, right? And also the sense of urgency there is to develop more environmental friendly inhalers and so on for patients to take use of. So I think that's one of the key issues also in this debate, right? That we want to stress that this will be a priority for patients moving forward.
And I guess briefly, Maureen, before I hand back to Arzu.
Yeah, I'd be happy to add. I mean, I think that, again, they can really be not at competition with each other, but the health and the safety and efficacy and positive environmental impact can be really intertwined in the best case, because if you optimize disease control and have good control, then you reduce potentially exacerbations, emergency room visits, and the like. And those exacerbations have quite a significant carbon impact. There's some good data and research in that regard. So really, if you focus on optimizing the selection of the right inhaler for the right patient, and I think the ERS paper really picks up quite well and maybe more eloquently than I could state this, then you actually also have a positive environmental impact.
No, that's really nice, Maureen. Right inhaler for the right patient. Arzu, back to you.
Yeah, that is good. Okay, I will hand over to Maeve now.
Thank you, Arzu. It has been an excellent discussion. We would now like to welcome back Francois into the discussion with us.
Okay, welcome back, Francois.
Thank you.
Now, at the final part of our discussion, I would like to ask one by one to each panelist and our guests, what are the key take-home messages from the discussions we have today? Just a few sentences, please. How can we start? Maybe we can start with our guests first. Maureen?
Of course. Well, I think it's clear we all have a shared imperative to respond to the threat of climate change and air pollution. It's just without question. So what I take from this discussion and the work that you all are doing and that we've done is, if we can harness the passion of patients, clinicians, and healthcare providers, the resourcefulness of policymakers, and the commitment of regulatory authorities, and the innovative spirit of industry, then I think together we can really enhance patient care and minimize the environmental impact. So again, as we've discussed, it's important to look at these issues holistically, consider all the touch points on the patient journey. And to me, this discussion and you all on this panel, I wish we could be in person, but we're saving some carbon by doing it in this manner. It just illustrates and what we've learned in this remarkable year living with a global pandemic is that we're stronger and more effective together.
Okay, Francois, your final comments or take-home messages?
Yeah. The main take-home message is that what you're doing actually in the context of the statement, the discussions that have taken place now, is precisely to take an interrelated, integrated, holistic was just mentioned now, approach to the matters at stake. And this is exactly the spirit that we're trying to develop through the Green Deal. You mentioned circular economy earlier, you mentioned climate change, you mentioned pollution. These are various clusters that we're working on, but we're not doing that in isolation, because what we've certainly learned from the past, and what your discussion has also illustrated now, is that we need to tackle these challenges together if we are to address them successfully. Well, we've come to the same conclusion. And this is what we're going to do when it comes to the revision of the ambient air quality directives, but it's going to apply to all we're going to do under the Green Deal, because what we do with our energy system, with our mobility system, with our food system, does have an impact on the responses that we need to develop on specific foci of our attention, such as air pollution in my case. And I think that you're teaching us that this is the right way to go about it, which is of course always good to hear. But what we know as well is that this is extremely challenging, because it's much easier said to commit to a holistic approach than done. But I hope that next week, when the European Commission releases its Zero Pollution Action Plan, you will see that we're making the right strides in those directions, and we will continue the conversation, because my end message is the conversation with the Commission needs to continue. We will have a lot of opportunities for dialogues with all stakeholders, including your constituencies, in the months to come. And we count on you to be involved, because you will enrich our reflections and make sure that what we develop actually responds to what patients require in particular, which is, of course, what we want to achieve as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Kels?
Yes, thank you. So I think they're very impressive comments. So I just want to build on what has been said before. I think it's extremely interesting to discuss this in a collaborative fashion between multiple stakeholders. As a patient, you're also often regarded as one of the endpoints of this process. And I think widening the scope and thinking about the wider issues of being a patient and what you can do, how your individual choices, convictions, actions, and so on can also make a small contribution. And then also having the ability to make a meaningful contribution in your own life by not only passively being a recipient, but also contributing to a better development, right, for asthma patients and for this area in general.
Okay, Sarana?
Thank you, Arzu. I think key messages from today that air pollution and climate change have huge impact on asthma patients. And as we heard mentioned, air pollution affects, of course, also health in general and health of cardiovascular patients and lung cancer and diabetes. But perhaps asthma patients are the most perceptive to those daily effects of air pollution on their health. And uniquely, air pollution affects asthma patients during the lifetime and has really big impact on our youngest ones and the children's from early age on. So this is additional reason to take an ethical responsibility to help asthma patients with doing more about these issues. I want to also stress that the central solution is partially an asthma patient, of course, but informing and empowering asthma patients, but also clinicians working with asthma patients. But main solutions lie on long-term reductions in air pollution, solving climate change with structural changes, political decisions, bold policies that go away from fossil fuels and provide solutions in how we design our cities, how we restructure our transportation, agriculture, energy systems, industry, and so on. So those are my final points for today.
Thank you. Amar, I would like to spend, we have 8 minutes, maybe 5 or 6 minutes with the questions you have from the audience. Maybe we can discuss it. And for the final 3 of the 2 minutes, I would like to have your final comments. Then I will wrap up and conclude.
No, sure, absolutely, Arzu. We've got some questions and I've reserved some to the end. So, Sarana, if I can ask you, we've got a question. In industrialized and poor countries, could poverty be a confounding factor or a differential factor in the role that pollution plays in asthma? Your thoughts?
Very good question. I'm glad it was posed because I didn't have time to answer. Environmental inequality and equity is a very important topic. Poorest patients are also the ones that are most affected. With respect to air pollution, they're usually most susceptible due to poor lifestyle, poor housing, they have poor indoor air pollution. Usually they live closer to sources of air pollution, to highways, to dirty industry and so on. And they're more susceptible and they probably have more limited access to good health care and treatment possibilities. So there's definitely exacerbation of environmental impacts in lowest, poorest patients. That's very important to address in building solutions. And we know that likely solving air pollution problems will benefit most those that are poorest and in lower socioeconomic class who are most exposed.
Yeah, no. Thanks, Sarana. A question I think actually for Françoise, if I can ask you. So from a policy, from a governmental perspective, do you invest in health expenditure to reduce air pollution instead of treatment after diagnosis?
Yeah, I mean, it is essential to look at both dimensions, right? And it's clear that when it comes to the health and environment interface, there is a lot more that can be done. And this is precisely what we're trying to push forward now, to make it clear that there's a lot that can be done through acting to prevent. And that is what we can do on the air pollution front, but that applies to many other fronts of policy making, which do make a significant difference for a number of health conditions. So we are very committed in the Commission to actually expand the dimension, the extent to which we actually do this across the board in a consistent fashion. And to do so, there's of course the relevant dimension that we can bring ourselves from the policymaking arena, but there's also all the research that is out there and all the expertise that we do not have or that we do not produce in-house, and that can help us guide those choices. So this is definitely one of the areas where we're committed to do more and where there's a need to do more. And if you allow me, since the issue of social impact was also underlined, I just wanted to also underscore that this is a crucial dimension from our perspective. We've documented that at EU level, there is unequal exposure and unequal impacts, and there's a very strong social vulnerability to air pollution, but also to noise, to extreme temperatures in Europe. This is something that has been studied by the European Environment Agency and on which we are acting, because we cannot tolerate the idea that some of our citizens are simply more exposed because they're less affluent. So this is something that is also at the core of our action in terms of the just transition that we want to deliver through the Green Deal.
Oh, thanks. Thank you very much, Francois. And just maybe, Azi, a final question to Maureen very briefly. So Maureen, we've heard and there's been lots of discussions, and we know that patients with asthma, if we can improve their adherence to their preventer medication, then we can reduce their reliance on the reliever medication. And the reliever medication has a huge global impact in terms of emissions. People have talked about smart inhaler technology and digital innovation. Do you think that's going to be the solution, or will that carry its own problems?
So that is a great question, Omar, and builds quite a bit on the conference we were just in a few moments ago. At a sort of, reaction level, you think, yes, that would be wonderful to get the smart inhalers to improve adherence. And I do believe there's promise there because, again, as we talked about, a well-controlled patient should be better for the environment, less SABAs, less exacerbations, et cetera. But it is complicated, like any of these environmental issues, because the more complex a device, it was potentially at least the higher the environmental impact. So looking at those issues again in a really, I'm using the word again, but a holistic and a kind of across the journey, and hopefully getting some data that could show, I think would be really important, because it is not necessarily the case that that the environmental impact would always balance out.
Yeah, and then how do we manage the inhaler recycling of the digital add-on in addition to the inhaler? So, but no, a discussion maybe for another time. So, Arzu, my perspective.
And I give your comments. Yeah.
Yeah. No, we need to get the diagnosis right in our patient, and we know that if we don't get the right diagnosis and we give them a treatment, then that's a big problem. They need to be on the right treatment, and then really, I think we need to be educated as healthcare professionals in inhaler use, so that we can impart this information to our patients so they engage with the inhaler. They can use it. They've been taught how to use it. They will use it. It's the right inhaler for the right patient. And really, for me, that's a real key element in the discussions that we've had. And just to add, Arzu, we've had a question on where people can find the European Respiratory Society position statement on asthma in the environment, and it is linked to the ERS Live Vision, but it is also on the ERS website. And I'm going to hand over back to you, Arzu.
Thank you. I would like to conclude and wrap up for this exciting and inspiring panel. And thank you very much for all your contributions. And we as ERS said that climate change and air pollution currently affect patients with asthma in multiple concerning ways. So we try to lay out the complex dilemma around asthma inhalers and the respiratory patient and the climate change, and concluded that the patient care must never be compromised. And in this statement, we have introduced the concept of green asthma patient, a patient who is enabled by greener healthcare regulations and who can make conscious choices to reduce their carbon footprint without compromising health outcomes. And we argue that this is a concept that will increase in importance. So the ambitious European Union Green Deal and other similar policies around all the world can provide solutions, and cleaner air policies will provide immediate and significant health benefits. I once again would like to emphasize that we should deal with the social determinants of health, such as air pollution, climate change, and poverty. And my final sentence is, ERS cares for patients as well as nature and planetary health. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you so much, Arzu. And thank you to the audience for joining us and participating in today's ERS Vision Live panel discussion. A recording of the discussion will be available to re-watch on the ERS Respiratory channel. The ERS position statement on asthma and the environment is available now to the general public, and we encourage you to access it via our platform. The ERS Vision Live series will continue. A new live discussion panel will feature on the ERS Respiratory channel each month, bringing together key individuals to discuss hot topic areas within respiratory medicine and science. Thank you again to all of our panelists for joining us today, and we hope you can join us again on the 31st of May.